So I'm Gabriella Goliger, really happy to be here with you. I'm a writer. I've got 3 published books and I'm working on my 4th. Um, uh, and I've been involved with the book club for decades. I can't tell you exactly how many because I've lost count, but I think it was sometime in the 80s. A friend of mine approached me, let's have a book club. And this club has, I think I'm the only person constant in this club because the membership has changed over the years. So the original of the original members, I think I'm the only one, but it's been a long lasting thing. So I think I know something about book clubs, at least ours.
And you're a writer yourself as well, correct?
Yes, I did say that.
Oh, yes.
It was the first thing I said.
I was busy hitting the record button. I guess I didn't hear it. So, and we had Gabriella as a guest panelist for our Reading is Fundamental event that we held during Pride. That was a lot of fun. And for those of you who are interested who haven't had a chance to see that, that's also posted on our website on OSPN. So you're welcome to watch that. Gabriella was a wonderful panelist there, and we had a really great discussion with some other writers for that event. So then, Bill, I'll get you to introduce yourself.
My name is Bill Staubi, formerly involved quite a bit with the Ottawa Senior Pride Network, but not so much these days. Most of my interests are in the visual arts, but I'm also an avid reader and belong to 2 current book clubs that I'm active in, and then I've been associated with the one that Peter will talk about, so I won't say anything about that and steal his thunder. But for me, reading and sharing reading with other readers is adds a dimension to the reading experience that is hard to capture in any other way. And so I enjoy very much these 2 groups that I'm involved in, and they're both very, very different in their focus.
Great. And then Peter, I guess that's a good lead into introducing yourself and talking about the book club that you host.
Yes, I'm Peter Hunter, and I'm the coordinator of the book club at Gay Zone, under the auspices of the AIDS Committee of Ottawa. Normal times, we at the Centretown Community Health Center on the 3rd Thursday evening of the month, but that's in hiatus right now, and do a wide range of things, try and get a balance of fiction, nonfiction, some different genres, some mystery, sci-fi, biography, history, politics, just a range of things. And our membership has fluctuated between about 4 and 10 people. Right now we've got 4 active members, and unfortunately 2 in the last couple of years that have gone on to the Great Book Club in Skye.
Okay, so clearly we have some panelists who have a lot of experience, either participating or running book clubs themselves. So I guess the first question that I have for you is a fairly broad question. I think Bill touched a little bit on this, and just sort of talking about what the appeal or the benefits of starting or joining a book club would be for people who haven't, participated in one before and might be curious about it.
Any particular order, Glenn?
Oh, anyone can answer. And sorry, I should have said that before. Yeah, please feel free to just jump in whenever you feel like.
Well, I'll let Bill go first because he's involved with 2 book clubs. So
yeah, the 2 clubs that I'm involved with, one is a group out of a used bookstore here in town, and it's called the All Nations Book Club. And we talk about Indigenous issues. We read work by Indigenous authors. And so we talk about both the content of the book and how it applies in real life. But most of us who are in the group are not Indigenous people. And so it's a group that facilitates essentially white people understanding Indigenous issues and understanding the Indigenous perspective. So for me, it's an opportunity I wouldn't normally get, even though I have all this great access to wonderful Indigenous work. I'm left to interpret it through my own cultural lens. And so having this group, which is mixed, Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, really brings a level, a depth to my understanding of the work that I might not get all on my own. The second book club I belong to is a group of gay men and women who are currently reading Black authors. And we call it a book club because that's the term most people use. But in fact, all we're working with are actually just readings by Black authors, short stories, excerpts from novels, that sort of thing. Partly just to manage the workload that people have right now, because we meet every 2 weeks rather than once a month. And so this way, we're exposed to a lot of work that doesn't take long to work through, but lends itself to a very rich discussion. Again, some of the members of the group are Black, most of the members of the group are not. And so it's, again, it's another attempt to get a perspective on the work that we're reading that you wouldn't normally get just by yourself at home or in a group of people just exactly like yourself. And so both of those, for me, really bring something to the reading experience that is so valuable to be able to interpret it. And you get such a diverse point of view. And I think that's probably something we'll hear from each of the speakers. A book club or a book discussion group gives you such a range of ideas about what the book is about and what the author meant, and their use of language and references to other work that you may never have read. It's quite an enriching experience participating.
Oh, great. That sounds really fascinating for sure. I mean, definitely, I think that's, absolutely one of the benefits of reading in general is just opening yourself up to different voices, different experiences, different cultures and perspectives. And, it doesn't matter whether you're reading a book with a female protagonist, male, different cultures, whatever. A lot of the human condition is, universal, right? So it's the sort of the differences that are, kind of interesting, and seeing those perspectives from a writer's point of view is amazing for sure. Did anyone else have any thoughts about why they got involved in book clubs?
Well, I think the other value to the book club is getting the perspective of the different readers. I know usually when I'm reading a book, I'm basically just looking for a good story well told that I can enjoy. But then other people in the club bring in all sorts of different things. One of our members usually shows up with 2 or 3 typewritten sheets, sorts of criticisms and points and things. And it's like, okay, you're reading this at a way different level than I am.
Sounds that way for sure. They come prepared. That's impressive. Gabriella, did you have any other thoughts that you wanted to add?
Basically, I would echo what the others said. You get another thing, and this is kind of may sound funny, but I think I remember books I've discussed a lot better than if I haven't discussed them. And I think as I get older, that becomes more important. So it just stays with me more. I always have the good intention of writing in my notebook what I've, a little praisey of what I've read, but that doesn't always happen. And then, so it's like any memory with it you share with other people, you've got more than one brain there to work with.
Yeah, what you said made me think of something that Peter had said about the intention you take yourself into reading a book. You pick a book up and you think, oh, I want something to lull me to bed at night, or I'm taking something to the cottage. But when I'm reading a book that I know is going to be for a book discussion, I think I tend to read it a little bit differently, because I'm looking for those things that I think people will see, or I'm making a greater effort to remember maybe some of the structural techniques the author uses, or how they play with language, or those kinds of things, because I know it'll come up and I'll want to participate in that discussion. So I think it not only the book clubs influence what you get out of a book, but I think participating in a book club influences what you get out of reading it, even if you just ended up reading it by yourself. If nobody shows up, knowing that you're going to talk about this book, at least for me, I pay attention to some things that I might gloss over. I might not stop to think about, is the author really referencing this social issue or that past structure or that kind of thing.
Great. Well, that I'm going to jump ahead a bit to some of the questions that I had, because I think this discussion that we've just had actually lends itself really well to this particular question that I had, which is sort of what makes a particular book a good book to discuss at a book club. Is a light read, a good simple read, a good book, or is it better to have something maybe like more culturally profound, like some of the books that Bill was talking about with his clubs? What do you think?
Well, go ahead, Gabriella.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, I think there's got to be something to talk about, and if it's a book that's just for entertainment, there usually isn't that much to talk about. So yeah, I think that a book that has raises questions and really good is a book that where that not everybody agrees about, because that's most interesting to but doesn't have to be. Go ahead, Peter. I'm done.
Yeah. One thing I remember when I was working in a bookstore, and we had a small community book group that met there once a month. And one month they were reading a book, and all anybody could say about it was, I really enjoyed it. I'm glad we read it. And the coordinator for the evening tried for about half an hour to get people to talk about the book, threw questions at them and that. And everybody just kept coming back with, yeah, I'm really glad that we read that. And they had nothing more to say about it. But to echo something that Gabriella just said, I found over the years that I've been coordinating, some of the best discussions that we've had have been about the books that everybody hated. Everybody had something to say about that book.
Well, it might be why, a lot of us watch reality TV or comedy, like we enjoy things that we can criticize and hate and then throw shade to or something. Bill is laughing because he knows that I watch RuPaul's Drag Race, and there's sometimes you enjoy a queen on the show because they're so awful that you like to criticize them. So that can be a fun experience as well, I guess.
I think the question too relates to what's the intention behind the book club. Some book clubs that I've been connected with are really a mask for a social gathering. So people use the book as a vehicle or an explanation for getting together periodically. And in that case, maybe a light book will float through quite nicely for folks. But I'm of the same school as Gabriella and Peter. I far prefer a book that's got some meat to it. It's got a bit of controversy, that takes a point of view, that encourages people to explore what does this mean and why do I think it means that. I love a book club choice that makes me question why I think the way I do, and whether it's because of the book or because of the people who are in the group and are willing to share a diverging or sometimes contrary point of view.
I would say too, like on the point of, a book that everybody hates or loves to hate, yes, that can be a fun discussion or an interesting discussion. But in my group, we always read novels, and that's a fairly large time commitment. And so you want to have a book that at least some people like, because it's a big investment of your time, or some people feel they've gotten something out of it. So I'd be tread carefully about choosing something that everybody hates.
Well, I suppose no one intends to pick a book that everyone's going to hate, but it might happen from time to time. I suppose that's true. You definitely don't want that to be the intent, or people will get a little exhausted by it all after a while. So in terms of like for people who have never been at a book club before, or might be nervous in terms of starting one, like what are some of the things that people can kind of expect when that sort of happens? Like I think you've already sort of touched on a few of those things, but maybe can elaborate a bit.
I defer to Peter and Gabrielle, who both started clubs.
I didn't start mine. I took it over when our previous coordinator moved to Victoria.
Well, what we, I mean, what can you expect? I think every group is going to be different. It's that's the nice thing. You can tailor it to your own. They're usually, most book clubs that I know of are fairly small, and so you just can tailor it to the group. In our group, it's all women. It's not all lesbians, but it happens to be all women. When we were meeting socially, in person, yes, there was always food involved. The hostess would put on some snacks, and sometimes that became elaborate, and sometimes it was very simple. So it was partly social and partly an intellectual discussion, but an exchange. I guess what can you, some of us have become, I would say we've become friends through the book club because we were already friends, but we learn more about each other through the discussions. So that's something. Partly, I hope, answers your question.
Definitely.
I think what you get out of a book club is all that Bill and Peter had said before. I mean, that just the enriching experience of discussion.
Yeah. And I think what you get out is directly reflective of what you put in.
Yeah.
If you come prepared to have read the book, or if not read the book, at least read up on the author or some of their work, or read up some online analysis of the work, something that you can contribute. It makes a huge difference to what you get out of it. Yeah.
That's an interesting question that you just sort of brought up for me, is like, if, for example, you had every intent to finish reading the book and you didn't get a chance to because, life gets in the way and it gets a bit busy. Have you ever sort of had that experience? And, do you still get something out of it, even if you haven't necessarily read the book? Like, you can at least participate in this, or listen to the discussion and find out a bit more about the conversation.
Yeah, sometimes you'll find you start the book well-intended and it just doesn't click with you. For whatever reason, you're not engaged in it, or maybe you just don't have the time to finish it. And when I've had that happen, being at the book club discussion really is a good way for me to gauge, am I going to come back to this book after the meeting and try to finish it off? Am I going to struggle with the parts I don't understand, or plow through the part that I think really should have been taken out? Or am I going to put it on the shelf and just chalk it up to experience? So it's very helpful in that way if you haven't finished the book. And some book clubs have very structured rules around if you haven't read the book, whether you should come or shouldn't come. Or my ex-wife belongs to a book club. If you haven't read the book, then you bring the wine for the evening. So I think clubs have a lot of different ways of handling if you haven't read it.
Right. Okay. So in terms of like, if you were starting a book club from scratch, and I guess Gabriella is probably the only one who has that particular experience, but I'm sure Bill and Peter, you also could at least elaborate on it. Like, what types of skills or experiences are helpful if you're going to be the host of a book club? Or, do some book clubs rotate who the host is going to be? Or, how does that sort of work? Because, if I was considering to do one, for example, like, would I be the type of personality, or like what types of traits would be helpful in order to do it?
Do you want me to start with that, or?
Sure, yeah, because I think you have the most specific experience with that, Gabriella.
Well, we've always been very loose about what our expectations, and so we don't have coordinators. We each, somebody somebody might host at their home, but nobody sort of takes a lead role. We just go around the room and talk about the book. So that makes it less. Well, I mean, maybe something more structured gives more, but there's no pressure. Nobody has to come terribly prepared in that sense, as much as anybody wants. I don't think I would hesitate to tell people they need to have some kind of skills, just because could be intimidating and off-putting. I mean, get together with people you know who like to read and like to talk, and go for it, and make that sort of contract among yourselves.
Our structure is extremely informal, as Bill would know. Basically, we just get around the table, and often I start off and I just give my impressions of the book, whether I liked it, whether I didn't like it, what I liked about it, I didn't like, maybe what I was hoping to get out of the book, and then just kind of turn it over to everybody else to give their comments. And as I say, the fellow who shows up with the typewritten sheets usually gives quite a detailed critique. I don't really prepare any questions. Sometimes I have a couple of things in mind that I'll throw out to the group if the conversation lags, but also sometimes the book is just a jumping off point to talk about all sorts of other things. So I would see myself as being a very benign dictator in charge of the club, just try and keep some discussion going and encourage everybody to take part.
I think in my experience, the skills a host needs depend on two things: the development of the book club and the nature of the book club. In the beginning, someone may need to be a bit more directive or benevolent dictator, as Peter was describing, until people gel as a group of people and get comfortable with one another and know how to enter into the conversation or how to exit out of it or redirect it. Then once the group gels and then it takes on a life of its own and doesn't really need a whole other direction. But I've been involved in some unusual book clubs, and one form that did need a lot of specific skills was a club that didn't read the same book. We read a book on a theme. So we might say that the theme for January is homelessness. And people would pick a book, whatever book they wanted to read, that dealt in some way, fictionally, non-fictionally, autobiographically, with the issue of homelessness. And you would come together and discuss it. And a group like that benefited more from someone, not necessarily always the same person, but someone who would act as a bit of a coordinator to make sure that everybody got to speak or had the opportunity, and sort of guided things a little bit, just because it was a looser kind of structure. But in the Black Authors book, that group that I'm involved with, there is one person who has taken a bit of a lead. I think half of that is his personality, and half of it is that each week we do it on Zoom, and so each week it's not clear who's going to be there, and so he makes the connections between things that happened at an earlier discussion that are relevant to what we're talking about now. But it's a role he adopted more than. There is a group that I belong to very, very briefly out of Toronto, which was a social justice reading group, and a lot of members. I think when I left, it was at like a 51 or 54 people, and that really needed somebody that was a fairly well organized kind of person. But I found the discussion didn't really work for me. It was people posting things and talking at the same time, and really very difficult to follow anything. It was much more useful to come afterwards and read what everybody had said and then just absorb that.
Right.
Well,
oh, sorry, go ahead, Gabriella.
Can I add two things? One is, and it was somewhat raised by, I think, both of you, but I think important to emphasize that it's important to let everybody gets a chance to speak. And sometimes some people are quieter than others. So the group has to kind of, even if there isn't one moderator, that there's something in the structure of the group that allows everyone a chance. And the other thing I wanted to say is that it's very different having a book club in person and on Zoom. And if you're on Zoom, then it really is important to have a moderator, somebody who gives, who says, you go next, because otherwise the voices collide and it's chaotic.
Right. Well, I did want to say that I really appreciated your answers to this question, because I think, if say, I or, somebody was starting a book club, they may have certain sort of hesitations like, oh, I can't do that. That seems like it's so overwhelming, or you'd have to be so like a certain type of person, like an extroverted personality or super organized or, whatnot. And what it's sounding like is that, a book club is sort of what you make of it. And really anybody, if you have that interest and sort of, I guess, determination to sort of keep it going, you don't have to be like a super outgoing, extroverted personality, because let's face it, a lot of people who read a lot are introverted people, right? So I think, that's something that's really like positive to sort of get across to people, is that, you do what you make of it, and you tailor it to who you are and to who the group members are, and it sort of evolves from there. So that's great.
Glenn, I remember that you have a little experience in this area too.
What's that?
You have a little experience in this area as well.
I do, yeah. I did. Peter is referring to the fact that we both worked in bookstores for many years, and one of the fringe benefits, let's put it delicately, with my role is in management in the bookstores was hosting a book club at 2 different chapters locations over the years. So, and I think Peter and I attended one at the Rideau and Sussex chapters for, it didn't last that long, maybe 6 months.
2 meetings, I remember.
Was that it? Oh, that's really short. Okay. But yeah, yeah, so I mean, I did have a little bit of experience myself, and I kind of just learned as I went, right? Like, I mean, that one didn't last long. The one I did at another location lasted quite a bit longer, and it was, fairly, it wasn't anything specific. I think we read fiction, nonfiction, whatever people suggested within the group that they wanted to read. But so I think, yeah, it's probably easier than people think it is, right? Like that, if you have that desire to do it, you can make it happen. So.
And don't overlook that amongst your members, there may be people who have that skill set that you feel you don't have. Just because you start up a book club and you help get it organized doesn't mean you have to perform every function that it has. And in fact, that can be a good way to cement people and their interest in the club, is to make sure that people have a role to play, not just in having read the book, but in operating the club. Right.
That makes sense. Absolutely. So in terms of preparation, like what types of things do you need to sort of consider? Like, are there like online resources that can sort of give you some helpful hints? I mean, this will become an online resource for people, but are there ones that you've used in the past, or like places where you can go to find recommendations if you're struggling to find, a place to start in terms of like what type of books you might want to discuss at a club?
Go ahead, Bill.
Just say I don't know of any. I've never used the internet for that.
Oh, well, there are the sort of obvious ones are the contests, like the award lists. You've got Canada Reads, Governor General's, Giller, Booker, all these. All you need to do is Google them, and you can get, the list of books from the last I don't know how many years. So that's one. Go for, if you want to look for prize-winning books. That's one way of finding a list. And if you want a specific theme, that some publishers specialize. I would think, for example, Arsenal Pulp Press has a lot of gay and lesbian literature, and so look for that. Yeah, I mean, there are various resources. I know that some newspapers and CBC they have book discussions, or they usually, like before Christmas, they get in their book discussion people, and they'll have offer a list of to the audience. So there's plenty, and your local bookstore is a good place for suggestions.
Yeah. While Gabrielle was sharing that experience, I did a quick look online in terms of how to start a book club, as opposed to how to rather than how to pick a book. And the Queen of Book Clubs herself has on her website how to start a book club at Oprah.com. So if you're not sure how to get started, Oprah will. You get a book, and you get a book, and yeah, and then Gabrielle's giving us good advice as to how to pick what books the group reads. But if you want to know about the mechanics, yeah, like all things, the internet has a ton of stuff on how to start a club.
Yeah, for me, my principal resource is the public library catalog, because our focus is books by gay men or about gay men. I go to the public library catalog and just do a subject search using gay, and just scroll through everything from the last year or two, and anything that kind of catches my eye or that I think the group might be interested in, make a note of it. And part of the reason why I do that is because some of our members don't like to buy the book, either for financial reasons or because of space considerations in their home. So they like to just be able to go and borrow the book from the library. So the first thing I check is whether it's available at the library, and I see if it's available in paperback to keep the cost down for those who want to buy it. And then I look to see if it's available in ebook format for those who prefer their e-readers. And then slowly I'll winnow that down to maybe 15 or 16 different titles to present to the group for the coming year.
Okay, that's interesting. So I guess that's a possibility too, is that, the members of the group can facilitate and help with choosing the selections of the books as well. And so that's another sort of good point. Maybe.
Yeah, I often ask for suggestions.
Yeah. You had mentioned.
I ask for suggestions. I don't always get them.
Right. We talked a little bit about this, but I'll sort of ask it specifically in terms of, maybe advantages or disadvantages in terms of the discussion and what comes out of it. If you have like a sort of a narrow focus to the types of books that you're reading, the subject matter, or is it, have you been in an experience where it's quite open to whatever the membership is interested in? Can you speak on what advantages or disadvantages there might be to that?
I missed the first part of the question, Glenn.
Oh, sorry. Well, I was just curious if there's what advantages or disadvantages there would be to having like a narrow focus, like what you were talking about in your club, where you specifically read novels by gay or books about gay men. If there's an advantage to that or disadvantage in comparison to having a book club that's more open and in their subject.
Well, I guess maybe one advantage you'd say is it helps you narrow down the selection a little more easily.
Right. Okay. Bill, do you have anything? Because you the book clubs that you talked about that you are participating in are quite specific in focus as well.
Yeah, the Black authors and the Indigenous group are quite specific. But in fact,
I complicate myself because I usually like to have local authors.
Sorry, Peter, you were breaking up a bit. I didn't quite hear what you said.
Are you there, Peter?
Oh, okay. Well, Bill, why don't you finish your thought and then we'll see if Peter can get back in a minute.
Yeah, the groups have a very specific focus, like the Black authors group and the Indigenous authors group. There we're being a bit more led by the folks facilitating it. And even within those two groups, there's just a myriad of subjects that you're going to cover. I can't imagine getting bored with Black authors or getting bored with, you know, or feel like, oh, well, I've read everything that Indigenous people have to say. My gosh, if I get to that, if you ever hear me say that, hit me with a book hard. So I don't think there's too much of a risk of you get too narrow a focus. The group that I belong to, where they picked a subject and people brought their own books, was very, very exciting in the beginning of the group. Here were all these different ways of even thinking about the theme coming in, but it did get a bit overwhelming because most of the people in the group would be sitting there thinking, oh, okay, I want to read that Jones book that Tom mentioned, and I got to remember to get that book that Sally mentioned, and you just never could keep it all straight, or you left every week or every month with a list of 10 books that you wanted to read, knowing you would never get to read them all in the month because you had to read the one for next month, for next month's theme. So having a bit of a narrow focus or having a bit of constraint around what you're reading sometimes I think just makes it more manageable. And if you're much of a reader, you're not going to be satisfied with just what you read at the book club. You're going to read other things anyway. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. But as Peter says, it can help give the group a focus and draw who might be interested in the group and who might not be interested in because they're interested in the subject.
Right. Okay. And Gabriella, your book club is, you said it's all women who participate. Do you read books that are about and by women, or do you have a more open subject?
We've had phases. So at one, there have been phases where we read primarily women's literature, but for a long time we've just it's been totally open, like whatever. It's just the only we concentrate on novels. That's what everybody seems to want to read, but it's wide open. But we also sometimes find ourselves following a thread. So this year, for example, we have actually read a lot of Black literature, and by literature by Black authors, and more women actually than men, and so it might sometimes go in that direction. The way I don't know if you have a question about how we choose, about how books get chosen. I could talk about that now, or wait till you.
Yeah, go ahead. I think we talked a little bit about that, but yeah, if you have some more specific things that you wanted to bring up.
Because in our group, what we have done is at the beginning of, say, a year, and our beginning was usually in September, we would everybody would come with a small list, and we would each person would talk about the book that they were proposing, and then we'd vote on it. Could be kind of elaborate, but it went according to everybody's. We all voted on what we wanted and then came up with a list. I haven't been doing that lately. Another club I belonged to in Victoria, BC, what they did was each person in the group had her proposed book was the choice. So each person had the opportunity to propose a book, and that was the book that was read. And that person also happened to be, and it was also the book that was read at that time. That month would be, that person would be the host of the social, like it would be at that person's home. So that's how it worked.
So I guess the one way to get out of ever hosting is to just never suggest a book, and then you don't have to. Then you don't have to bake cookies or have tea or anything. No. Did anyone have any other thoughts before moving on? Peter, are you back with us? We were having.
Yes, yeah, I clicked out a couple of times there.
Yeah.
I guess like one thing to pick up with from what Bill was talking about with his club that ran with a monthly theme, but not necessarily a particular book. A few times for our book club, if there was a couple of books that were kind of on the same theme, like let's say for November, a couple of military history books, I put them together, but I found in the end it didn't really work that well because often I was the only one that had read both books. Some people in the group had read one book and some people had read the other book. And it made it really hard to get the discussion going because not everybody could talk about both books.
Mm.
So I kind of stopped doing that.
Right. I guess that depends on the type of book. Like I think, Bill, you were talking about, yeah, like people sort of bringing in like the homelessness example that you had where people just sort of brought in a book and, you know, it wasn't so much about, you know, discussing and analyzing a specific book, but about a theme. And yeah, I guess there could be challenges to that, but then also something that, you know, really kind of exciting could come out of that too. So that's interesting.
I think that comes back to when the club is being organized, for it to be clear amongst the members what is the group trying to accomplish by being a book club, and then taking it from there, not assuming that because you're coming to the book club with a specific idea of what it'll be, that's what everybody else in the club will come there wanting. And if you sort that out in the beginning, you won't have much in the way of a challenge or a problem. If you leave it to sort itself out, you could get into some difficulties. But one aspect of choosing the books for the book club that neither of the groups that I'm actively involved in now do, but I really appreciate about the group that Peter has been operating, is that he chooses the books for the year. And so you know at the beginning of the reading year, what are the 12 books you're going to try and cover in that year? And I find it a delight for a couple of reasons. It gives me a year to find these books and source them, because I love to haunt a used bookstore. I love to haunt a discount book site. So it gives me the chance to do that. But it also allows me to read more at my own pace. So if I've raced through this month's book and I'm just trying to decide what am I going to read next, I might choose one of the 12 books that we're going to read for that year. And or I might choose to read something else along the line of one of the books that we're going to read, something else by that author, something else in that same vein. So it allows, having had that list, and I actually, even though I don't attend Peter's book club anymore, I use their list as a reading guide for the year as well. And I found it a helpful way to help me choose between what books to read, because there's just so much stuff out there.
Yeah.
So Bill, you're saying you're one of those people who follows us on Facebook but never comes for the meetings?
That's right. I follow you on Facebook. I post to your Facebook site. I comment on your posts. I adore you, but no, I don't show up at the meeting. And you know why.
Oh dear. Well, that
Not all
actually kind of
members are created equal.
Sorry?
Not all book club members are created equal.
Well, that is an interesting question because, yeah, I mean, I am sort of curious about sort of the dynamics of, you know, how to sort of facilitate personalities that may be difficult, or, you know, if common to, you know, I mean, it's important to have a lively discussion, but if things get, you know, disruptive or really argumentative, that can be, you know, a challenge, to put it mildly. How do you sort of, obviously you've experienced some of those things, like how do you navigate your way through those things? Like if there's a personality who does turn, you know, people that you think are really good contributors to the club, but, you know, you have one person who's driving people away, or, you know, I mean, I guess there are challenges to the dynamics and the relationships that can happen between members, and the fallouts that potentially could happen. So I'm curious about that, because, you know, I mean, hopefully, if you're starting a book club, if you're joining a book club, you'll want it to continue. So.
Well, let's see. We've been fairly fortunate that, you know, we haven't had personality conflicts that are particularly problematic. But as I said, I've been with this club long enough, and the memberships have changed, that, yeah, there have been occasions. I think on the whole, you know, sometimes people can be a little sensitive and feel like it's very, your feelings about a book reveal a lot about you, and somebody sort of stomps all over the fact that you love this book that somebody else hates. I mean, that sometimes can be a little painful. I guess it's just being mature and negotiating it. I don't know. There's no, because we're not, yeah, we don't have a facilitator, or that this isn't that kind of thing. It's just a social group. What I have found is that if somebody really doesn't fit in, they eventually leave. And that's a kind of a good thing, without having to be asked usually. And that has happened occasionally. I think the main trick is to not invite somebody into your club unless you feel fairly confident that they will they will mix well with the rest.
Yeah, and I think especially if you are the organizer or the facilitator, to be comfortable with people who choose to leave. That you know, it's not necessarily the disruptive person or the person you might think, oh, this is the one that they should ask to go, that needs to go. Sometimes it's just as comfortable for the person who's bothered by them to say, there's another way for me to spend my time. There's another way for me to appreciate these books, and to let them go and not drive yourself crazy trying to find a way to make everybody fit together.
Yeah, like for the book club at Gay Zone, it's a little more challenging because it's kind of a public book club. Like anybody can show up for the meetings, so it's not a matter of inviting anybody in to be part of the group. But like the challenge that we ran into, that Bill was involved in, was somebody who took issue with something involving Bill in another group, and then tried to take that public on a different forum. And I guess in the end, Bill just kind of felt like he didn't really feel comfortable around this other person, and just stopped coming to our group.
Yeah, I guess it's challenging because, I mean, obviously, yeah, it depends on sort of the parameters of the group. I mean, obviously, the group that Gabriella has set up is very different than the one that Peter has taken on at Gay Zone, and that it's a sort of public drop-in. So that certainly adds another challenge, but I could certainly see that if there was somebody who, you know, was really problematic, and I know, not so much in the experiences I had doing a book club, but in other things that I did, like if people remember Pink Triangle Services back in the day, I used to co-facilitate a discussion group. And for the most part, it went pretty well, but you know, every once in a while you would get someone who would come in and who would be kind of a bit, well, a challenging personality, I guess, and would sort of steer the conversation in a direction that made other people uncomfortable. And yeah, I mean, it's a tough line to do as a facilitator, because you're like, well, you know, again, those were that was a drop-in group as well. So it's like, do you disinvite people or discourage them to return? It's tough, because you don't want somebody coming in who will be so disruptive that the core group of people, you know, will stop coming, and you know, then you've got a group of maybe the one or two people who can stand this person, and him or her, and yourself facilitating this sort of messy group. So it can be a challenge, I guess, but it's something, I guess, to just, yeah, I'm curious about that, you know, as you know, setting up ground rules or whatnot. But it's, you know, I guess that's the nature of you know, trying to facilitate something that's, you know, social, and you know, people have different personalities and different perspectives and different opinions, and they're going to express them. So it kind of comes with the territory, I guess. I just want to mention, Michael raised a good question about, in the chat, about a place for used books, recyclelivre.com. And he's curious if that's better than Amazon. And I think, for my personal perspective, pretty much anywhere is better than Amazon, considering how they treat their employees and how they've decimated the book business for small local booksellers. So, but does anyone have any thoughts about that?
I've never used them. Has anybody used them?
No.
No, I haven't either, but happy to know about it.
Check it out.
Yeah, it's a good tip, Michael. Thanks for sharing it, for sure.
Yeah.
So I think, Gabriella, you talked a little bit about what it's like to host a book club through Zoom versus something in person. I think when people think of a book club, you tend to think of, you know, meeting in person and having that discussion and having you know, someone host in their place and offer some treats and that sort of thing. But with the pandemic, a lot of book clubs have switched to Zoom for it. Does it radically change the dynamic of the book club, or is it able to kind of survive and thrive just in a slightly different format?
So what we found is, yeah, it's a different experience. It's in some ways not as rich. I think being together in person there's something very special about it, and in so many ways. And a Zoom meeting is not as social a meeting. Like in our book club, and I think a lot of book clubs, there's a lot there. When we meet in person, there's a lot of chat about how, you know, what's going on in somebody's life recently, and just kind of catching up on friendship things. Well, there's the real Peter suddenly.
Hey, Peter. We can see you at last.
I just noticed this little icon saying start video. There we go.
Well, it's only about an hour in. That's not too bad.
Well, it's a good thing I'm not as sweaty now as I was.
Anyway, yeah.
Sorry, Gabriella, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just go on. Yeah, so there's, you lose that, you know, a lot of the social dynamic. On the other hand, we do, because we have to be more structured on Zoom, we get down to brass tacks a lot better, and we don't spend as much time. We actually spend an hour talking about the book and not much else. And that's about all anybody wants to be on, you know, maybe an hour and a half, and then it's accomplished. I wanted to say something else. I don't know if it'll come up, but I did, but it is related to the Zoom versus in person. And that is, I don't know if any of you guys, if you ever invite authors, but authors do like to come to book clubs. It's a real treat for especially local authors, but because they get to talk to people who've actually read their book, and that's often not the case if they're doing a reading. Then get questions from people who don't know anything about the book. So it's an opportunity, and we haven't done this actually in our club, but with Zoom you can invite authors who are not from your city, and you've got a wider spectrum. And so that's something to consider.
That's a great point. Absolutely.
Yeah, in the Indigenous reading group that I belong to, we just recently had Jesse Thistle speak with the group about his book. And I know Peter has invited some authors to some of his groups.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from the Access, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's can be a double-edged sword. We've in my time we've had 2 authors come, and both of them were great. They were really engaging, had a wonderful discussion. People liked the book. There's another local author I considered actually inviting to the meeting, but he was self-published or through a vanity press of some sort. And I just didn't get around to it. And it was such a good thing because everybody hated the book. It was almost universal. Nobody had anything good to say about it. And it would have been a really awkward evening either for the author having to sit there and listen to everybody rip his book apart, or for everybody to not be able to say what they wanted to say because they're trying to be nice because the author's there. In the end, I was really glad that I hadn't made any arrangements for that author to come in, because it would have just been an awful evening one way or the other.
I'll imagine. Yeah.
Oh no. Well, maybe it's an idea to, have the book, as part of, a month selection, and then after you've read it and sort of everybody's agreed, yeah, we like this book, go ahead and invite the author. Maybe you can get around it that way,
Like, it's hard to say, because the first author who showed up was somebody who followed our Facebook group, and didn't invite him. He just said, "Oh, I'm coming to your meeting because I see you're discussing my book." but he turned out to be a wonderful person. We had a great discussion about the book, but we also talked to him about writing process and the publishing process and kind of all what goes on behind the scenes where you actually get the book. And so it was really interesting to hear his perspective on that. And then the other one that we did was Such a Lonely, Lovely Road by Giza Lope, South African author who's based here in Ottawa now. And she was a delight to have. It was just such a wonderful meeting.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was really glad that I had actually made the effort to invite her.
Yeah, I think Bill, Gabriella, and I all know Kahiso quite well, and she was one of our panelists for the Reading is Fundamental event, and she's amazing, and yeah, just a really engaging person, and the book was fantastic. So yeah, that was a good one to pick for sure. And actually, I think Bill, you may have even recommended that one for me, so for that book club. So
for your panel,
yeah.
Because of her reading at Peter's book club, she and I became very, very good friends, and I've ended up reading the rest of her work and been doing a number of her things. So we communicate quite a bit. So I was happy to recommend her to you.
So there you go, Michael. There's a good book for you to read, pick up if you haven't done it yet. So we're getting to some of the last questions that I had here, which is actually probably pretty good timing as I'm looking at the clock. So I'm curious about, I guess, Peter, this probably happens to you quite a bit more than maybe, say, in Gabriella's, where, you would probably invite somebody new to the group. But if you're having someone new coming into the group, how does that change the sort of dynamic of how it works? Do you find that people can kind of naturally fit in? Do they feel like, because sometimes if you're a new person to a group, you sort of feel maybe a little hesitant or uncomfortable to, speak up, right? So how do you sort of engage those people to sort of feel comfortable in the space?
Well, I guess it depends on the person, but like, as I say, our discussions are pretty free flowing, and sometimes we don't actually spend a lot of time talking about the book itself. Talk about people's related life experience or other things that they've read, or and so I think somebody who's at least outgoing, they can take part in the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're not solely focused. But yeah, maybe with some people you might have to make a little more effort to try and draw them out a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Or there might be somebody that you might have to kind of tamp them down to, like, okay, let's let somebody else talk for a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
Because again, there are some people out there that are quite happy to talk about anything, whether they know anything about it or not. They like to talk.
Right.
And so you might have to kind of, shush them down a bit and say, okay, let's let George say what he wants to say.
Bill, I'm curious about your experiences joining clubs. Like, when you first started, did you feel that the book clubs were welcoming? How did you sort of feel, like, what was kind of on you, I guess, to sort of contribute and feel included?
Mm-hmm. I think when I first joined a group, I first want to get a measure of the temperature of the group. Are they chatty? Are they quiet? Is there analysis of a book relaxed and just what they thought? Or are there people in the group that are going to deep analysis? Are there people that are going to be drawing in references from other places? I usually take a meeting or two just to get a sense of that, so that okay, what kind of contribution can I make here? And then you gradually float a few ideas, you float a few impressions, you feed off of something somebody else has said. I really like that point that Bob made because it tied in with this, or gee, I hadn't seen the situation the way Sally did. Can you explain more about where that comes from, Sally? So that you start to feel your way around folks, and then if you're comfortable, then you wade into the water more deeply, and if you're not, I hold back until I am comfortable, or worst case scenario, I think, okay, this isn't the group for me. I'm too old to be here if I don't want to be. I'm going to pack up and go home. And there's another book club or discussion group right around the corner. There's no lack of them around to join up. So each group has its own flavor, and if it's a new group, you've got more of a chance of influencing how things are developed. If it's an established group, then there's more onus on you to fit into them, rather than to barge in and say, "This is who I am. Gather around and get ready." So it's a lot depends on the group, and just suss out what they're about and who they are and how they operate and what they like and they don't like, and Yeah, you'll find your way.
Mm. And Gabriella, did you have any thoughts on that?
I don't think anything different from what both Bill and Peter said. I mean, yeah, I mean, basically, I don't think so. Sorry.
Okay. Well, the next question is probably more specifically, and the last question actually that I have is going to be, I think, a good one for you to answer, because you had mentioned that the book club that you started has been around for about 25 years now, which is like unbelievably impressive. And the dedication and the commitment is incredible. So I'm curious about like how you keep interest and momentum happening in a group and maintain it, both for yourself as somebody who's, you know, started the group up, and just, you know, for the other members in terms of like, you know, keeping it fresh and exciting for them for that long.
Well, the book club I've been involved with has sort of fluctuated. So there were times when it went well, and then other times when it petered out a bit and had to be revived with finding a few new members. You know, if people leave and then suddenly there's only three people and two of them don't show up, then you've got so it's fluctuated, but I guess keeping it going is just a matter of looking to make sure that when you don't have enough people, finding a couple new people that will be compatible. And you know, I guess there's just a mutual desire to everybody to read and to talk about books, and so somehow it kept going, and I just like having a book club. So somehow I just, yeah. I don't know what the optimal, I think there's probably an optimal number of people because, and to my mind, it's somewhere around 10 or 12 is the maximum in my mind, but it doesn't have to be. But, and then 4 was probably the minimum because, as I said, not everybody shows up every time. So you've got, sometimes you, that. Or some people, not everybody always reads the book for one reason or another. They can't make it and so on.
Do you have? I'd agree with Gabriella on that. That to my mind, 6 to 8 is kind of the optimum number. Don't go much above 8 because then the discussion becomes unwieldy.
Mm-hmm.
Start getting down around 3 or 4 people. Sometimes it's hard to keep a discussion going.
Mm-hmm.
Right. In terms of sort of if, you know, people leave, I mean, obviously there are a number of reasons why people might have to, right? They move, they have a baby, and or you know, or have some other sort of life commitment, work gets intense and they just don't have the time, or you know, or they lose interest. Is there, like, do you find that it's a good idea to maybe just sort of have a little, it doesn't have to be anything formal, but like maybe just a little discussion about like why someone's leaving? I mean, maybe you just accept their explanation at face value, but I'm curious if it's worthwhile to sort of have, you know, for lack of a better word, an exit interview where you're just kind of sort of checking in with somebody and saying like, you know, was there some reason that you didn't get along with people, or you didn't enjoy the books that we chose, or, you know, I don't know, if particularly if it was somebody who you thought was really contributing a lot to the discussion and will be a big loss to the group if they go. Probably that's too formal for most.
Well, I guess in my case, in our case, no, I think if somebody just tells us, you know, they don't have time, or their life circumstances have changed, you know, let them tell us what they want, and that's enough. And if they want to tell somebody in the group a little more, that's also okay. But I wouldn't go probing. Sort of leave it the way it is.
And it might also depend on what they were looking for. Like, I know one fellow who came a couple of times to our meetings and then dropped out. He didn't like the fact that we were, like, the books that we were tending to read were usually about a year old, so that they'd be in paperback. He wanted to read, like, the stuff that was out right now, like, so this thing that came out last week, let's discuss it at the next meeting. It's like, well, for people who want to get a physical book, not all of us can afford to spend $35 every month. Maybe if you're retired on a good government pension, yes, but for some of us, that's not. And it just kind of like, well, sorry, we can't offer what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I wouldn't have thought that would be that important to people, but I guess if it's something that's like very topical.
Well, I think he wanted to be able to discuss with other people books that were very current.
Right.
Like, not by other people, I mean people outside of the book club, other friends and that. He wanted to be able to say, oh, I've read the new Hollinghurst. Oh, I've read this. Oh, I've read that. And it's like, well, sorry, that's not what we can offer for you.
I should mention that our group usually does, we do the same sort of thing as yours does, Peter, looking for books that are readily available in the library. I always like to think that books are there for a long, they're there for the long haul. Just because they're not on the shelves right now doesn't mean they don't exist. And I like to read classics too. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I just got a direct message from Michael, was sort of asking about the title that I'd mentioned before. That was a good book. It was by Kahizo Lezago Malope, I think is how you pronounce her name. I'm terrible for that. I'm just going to pull it up because I should have the book right here if I can find it. Is that it?
I'd like to suggest, I don't know if, okay, go ahead.
So that was the book there.
Yeah.
Michael, if you can see it. Such a lovely, lonely, lovely road. And I picked mine up at Perfect Books on Elgin Street, but I'm sure you could find it in many locations. So yeah, it was a really great book. It's a short one, so it's easy to read, and but it was very engaging, very interesting. So definitely recommend it. And sorry, Gabriella, you were about to say something too.
Well, I was going to say, like, I don't know if we have the wherewithal to do this, Glenn, but it might be kind of interesting and fun to each of us provide the list of books that we've had, our groups have read in the last 12 months, or or what we're planning to read in the next 6 months or something, and share that with each other and share it with with the Senior Pride in case people might find that interesting.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I could absolutely, if anyone wants to send me that information, I'd be happy to post that, like either in our Facebook group, or we do a OSPN, we have a weekly mail out about all the different events that we do. And then, as I say, we'll be posting this recording on our website. So yeah, I'd be happy to share all of those resources with people, because yeah, I mean, like I think Peter had mentioned, I mean, there's just so much out there. It is challenging to sort of narrow down. So having kind of recommendations from people can be really helpful, because yeah, like you can be introduced to people that you wouldn't have even thought to look at, and be really enriched by the experience of reading their books. So so yeah, I guess that sort of wraps up the what I had sort of wanted to discuss. But if any of you have any sort of ideas or things that maybe I didn't bring up that you'd like to sort of share as ideas based on your experiences, either hosting or participating in book clubs. And Michael, if you wanted to pass on some more questions to the panelists, it's a great time to do that before we wrap up. So I'll pass that up. I'll open that up to you all and for some final thoughts.
Well, I guess one thing I'd like to mention, I took part in a meeting for a group called a social book exchange. And it was kind of like a book club, except that everybody was encouraged to bring 1 or 2 books to talk about, and then hopefully somebody else in the group go home with your book, and you'd bring somebody else's book home.
Almost like a Secret Santa.
Well, yeah, just like, you know, you'd be exposed to a range of things that you probably wouldn't have looked at yourself. If somebody was really enthusiastic about something and you're like, yeah, that sounds kind of interesting, you could take it home. You weren't trying to scribble down names and authors and stuff. You actually got to bring the book home, and hopefully somebody else would be geeked enough by your book that they'd want to take it home.
That's happened in the book club at Victoria that I joined at one point, that everybody came with a book to give away. And take one home.
Did you have any other last sort of thoughts, Bill?
No, other than if somebody is thinking about starting a book club, then that's really all you need. Start a book club, see how it goes, see where you can take it, and it's a book club. If it doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. There's another group of readers somewhere else to connect to, so go for it.
That's fair enough. That's probably a good place to end. And of course, like, one book that I should recommend, or some books, is Gabriella's books, because she's an excellent writer. I've read 2 of her novels now, and I see Michael in a previous post had mentioned that he read Song of Ascent, which I think is your first novel, is that right? Or a short story collection, so. Yeah.
Correct, yes.
So yeah, Gabriella Goliger, she's a local author and writes amazing fiction. So definitely, if you haven't tried her yet, I would recommend her. So, and I want to thank you all for participating today. It's been a really enriching, interesting conversation. It's certainly opened my eyes to a lot of the ins and outs and some great advice and tips that I'm sure that other people who will watch this will find really knowledgeable and valuable. So thank you so much for participating tonight.
Thanks for hosting this, Glenn.
My pleasure. Yeah, and as I said, I'm the facilitator for OSPN and with our online programming. So we have a schedule of events, and we've got lots of stuff coming up in December. I'm going to be very busy. So tomorrow morning, early afternoon, actually, we have a gentle movement and mindfulness class. This is the 3rd in our series of 4 of these classes, and they're just it's a light sort of stretching and exercise and sort of focusing on relaxing your body. And that happens tomorrow at 1:30. And Thursday, we have Lyle Borden, who will be teaching us some theory and practices with self-defense. So if you're interested at all in that, that's a great thing. It'll be the first of 2 events. The second event, which will happen in another couple weeks, will be focusing on the actual like moves and stuff that you might want to learn or think about. So that's a really good thing. And I do recommend, if you join us for that, to bring a pencil and paper, because there's going to be a lot of really good advice and tips that will go by fairly quickly. So and then on Friday, we are having our weekly meditations back. Our facilitator was sort of down for a few weeks with a medical procedure, but she's healing well, and we're thrilled to have her back. So that's on Friday at 10 in the morning, and she'll take us through a really amazing meditation. These are some of our best attended events, and people really respond favorably to them. And then on Monday, the 7th, we have our Movie Monday, which we do every Monday, and we show a free movie for people that's usually queer themed, or at least queer adjacent. And by request, we're showing Mamma Mia 2, the Here We Go Again sequel. And so I know Bill will like that because he's a big Cher fan and she's in that movie. And then on Wednesday the 9th, we have another Gentle Movement at 1:30. And then on Thursday, we've got our bi-weekly Baby Zoomers Coffee Club. So that's hosted by George Hartsgrove and Lise Cloutier, and they do it's just an open discussion. So, you know, whatever you're feeling in terms of, you know, whatever's going on in your life, or topical information, or how you're feeling with the pandemic, it's a great sort of social event for that. And then again on Friday, we have our meditation again at 10 in the morning. And then the big thing that's coming up is we have our Jolly Holiday Fete and Feast, which is on Wednesday, December 16th, and that'll be at 6 in the evening. And what we'll be doing is just encouraging people to bring your own meal, whether you cook it, whether you order it in, no judgment there, and just enjoy a dinner. And we'll be putting on a series of pre-recorded performances by a variety of different local entertainers. So some comedians, some singers, some of the choirs, and some drag. And so it'll be a really fun event. And all of these things, because I know I've bombarded you with a lot of information, that's all on our website. So if you didn't catch all of that, you can go onto our website, which is ospn-rfao.ca, and you can get it there. And then if you're interested in finding out more about our events, we have a newsletter. So on our website, we have a little form at the bottom that you can just join in, and every Friday I type out an email and send that off to everybody who's interested in our events. So we definitely encourage you to get involved and participate and join us, because we know that the community is going through a lot with the pandemic, and it's our way to sort of help reach out and have people still feel connected. So thanks again, everybody, and I hope to see you all really soon. So have a great night.
You too. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.